Hello and welcome to another episode of AI Buzz. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have some cool things to talk about. Namely, we're going to talk about how New York City is looking at hiring companies that use AI to make job decisions. And specifically, I want to talk about the story coming out of CBS News, reporting that New York City is going to be the first in the U.S. to really introduce regulations on companies that want to be using these types of hiring software programs, because really the danger here is introduction of bias into hiring decisions. And right now there's zero regulation at these companies to actually use this software, and they're pretty much going unchecked, which definitely pretty dangerous. So props to New York City for wanting additional kind of transparency with these types of companies. And specifically, they want to do two things. So they want to first notify applicants that they're being subjected to these types of programs, which I think is great. Because right now, how it works is a lot of people who apply to pretty well-known companies such as Delta Airlines, IKEA, Unilever. These large companies are paying for these platforms that will use AI to kind of screen people out, and there's no way to really know if your data is getting crunched through one of those types of platforms. It's not required for them to disclose that to you. And the second part of what New York City is pushing for is some sort of auditing of the actual software itself. So they'd be subjected to kind of an independent third party going in and seeing, is this introducing racial bias or gender bias into the hiring decision? I think we can all agree that's definitely needed, because while machine learning, I think, can do some of this more efficiently than a human, and it probably cuts down time to make a decision and may even correlate to actual on-the-job performance, can definitely be treated a lot like a black box sometimes. And the fact that there's no auditing into exactly what's going on under the hood is definitely problematic. Props to New York City again. I hope this kind of becomes the norm. Any company that is going to be looking to use this software, at least disclose to the applicants what's going on, and then they can choose whether or not they want to take part in kind of an experiment like this. Because this is pretty new stuff within probably the last 4 or 5 years. Stuff's starting to catch on and becoming more and more complex. Like these are definitely pretty large companies that are starting to use these platforms to find applicants and match applicants to positions. So the most popular video interview software package is HireVue. And this is the one that I heard about a while back. They have some pretty appealing claims for hiring managers. So they claim 90% decrease in time to hire, improved diversity, return on investment. It's definitely the most widely used. They have 17 million interviews that have been kind of pumped through their process. So they probably have the best training data set to go off of. So if you're a hiring manager and you kind of saw these numbers, you definitely raise some eyebrows and you'd be wanting to take a look at it. So long story short, let's with these types of software platforms, let's be cautious before we kind of just jump on board and trust them blindly. While I think there's some probably credible science behind it, let's just make sure we're not introducing unseen biases. Another platform that I've also seen is called HireScore. This one I've heard less about. Pretty much the same concept, though, like their name implies, they really want to be able to give a single metric based on each candidate and kind of give you data on what it thinks is going to be the best candidate for your position. So that's a pretty cool concept. Yeah, I've heard less about this company, and the only thing that caught my eye on this website was pretty hilarious. They don't really talk about bias at all, which is surprising because that's definitely one of the first things you'll hear about when these make the news is how there's bias introduced into it potentially. But there's only this little section that I could find here. So first they talk about how data is secured. That's great. But then they talk about how they mitigate bias, and there's no like learn more button for this section. So that caught my eye. So ways to actually look at reducing bias. TensorFlow has some cool new features that I was reading about. They have a tool that they just released called MinDiff. And what MinDiff does is it's going to look at different holdout sets that you create when you train a model. And it's going to try to reduce differences in scores between different sets. So that's something that's typically not really done right now. Sets are treated independently. But kind of looking at this more holistically and comparing the sets and make sure one set, isn't focusing in on a certain feature that could introduce bias. It's trying to look at it as a whole and lower difference between sets, which is really great. So MinDiff, definitely check this one out. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I was reading more about this. It's just one of the many ways that hopefully become more commonplace when we try to look at minimizing any sort of biases that we're introducing into our machine learning models. So that's about all I had for this episode of AI Buzz. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you like this content, let me know. And have a good day. Bye.